Imagine, if you will, a supersonic jet filled with the most famous movie stars, the wealthiest people in the world, the owners of big business, and suppose that that jet were to crash. That's pretty much what happened with Titanic.
I would really relate the Challenger, loss of the Space Shuttle Challenger, to the loss of the Titanic, where we sort of put a little too much faith in our technology and it bit us.
Almost immediately after the sinking on April 15, 1912, people start speaking about locating and possibly raising the Titanic.
Vincent Astor, John Jacob Astor's son, was very interested in recovering his father's body, and he wanted to put together an expedition to go out there for that purpose, and his body was recovered, and so he abandoned that idea.
Over the years, all kinds of plans are made to raise Titanic, involving everything from electromagnets to ping pong balls.
It was comical. And naturally, none of that would work. I mean, they forget to take into effect that if you take a ping pong ball just 10 feet underwater, it crushes, so let alone 12,000 feet.
Even if these ideas were possible, first the wreck had to be located. Unfortunately, the navigation methods in use at the time involve calculating the ship's speed in relation to the position of the stars. We know today that the ship's last reported position is nearly 14 miles off.
Which can be explained by a confusion in changing the time zone, changing clocks. And so the most important fix of the navigation officer, his career, the most important fix for the captain of the ship to confirm, they actually flubbed and sent everybody to the wrong place for the rescue.
There are few serious scientific attempts to locate Titanic. Then in the 1970s, Robert Ballard, a young scientist at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, sets a unique goal. He and his colleagues decide to use their developing technology to solve the greatest maritime mystery of all time.
Very, very early on, I knew that one of his goals was to go out there and see if he couldn't find it, while at the same time, obviously, testing the technology that he was working so hard on.
The plan blossoms in 1977 when the Alcoa Corporation lends their salvage vessel, the Sea Probe, to the institution. The ship features a huge pipe apparatus that can send instruments 3,000 feet into the ocean.
I went to Westinghouse Corporation, I bought a deep-towed sonar system. I went to the Navy and bought a big lighting system. And I borrowed about $600,000 worth of equipment to put on the end of the Alcoa Sea Probe.
But inexperienced boat hands incorrectly fasten the pipe. The mistake is not realized until they begin towing operations a few days out of port.
All of a sudden, the pipe broke, everything went, and the counterweight came running down right towards us, because we were in a room underneath all that, and hit it. And then we ran out, and everything was gone.
The 1977 accident sends Ballard and his team at Woods Hole back to the drawing board. They would not mount another expedition for Titanic for nearly a decade. In the meantime, another character emerges in the search for Titanic, charismatic Texas oilman Jack Grimm.
Why was it going through iceberg-infested waters? That's one of the answers that we hope to find when we reach the Titanic.
He had an absolute I-can-do attitude, and if you wanted a partnership to look for the Titanic, you wanted a risk taker, because this was big, risky business.
In the late 1970s, Grimm, known for his searches for the Loch Ness Monster and Noah's Ark, announces that he is going to find Titanic. He enlists two major players in the oceanographic scene, Fred Speece of the Scripps Institution of Oceanography in California, and Bill Ryan of Columbia University's Lamont Doherty Geological Observatory.
Grimm wanted to look for it right away, and there was no existing equipment, unscheduled, available to him. So we'd have to build all the technology from scratch.
The first Grimm expedition leaves Florida in mid-July 1980. Grimm funds the development of Seamark, a sophisticated new sonar system.
And I was convinced they were going to find it. It wasn't that big a search area. I just figured I was going to read in the news, they found it, and that was the end of that.
The Seamark is a side-scan sonar which creates a beam of sound. What makes Seamark so revolutionary is the width of its beam, 3 miles across. But the trade-off for being able to survey that much area is that Seamark's results are not detailed enough to define a wreck site versus a natural marine formation. GRIM targets 14 areas that might be the final resting place of Titanic. But plagued by stormy seas and equipment problems, GRIM is forced to head back to port on the 17th of August, 1980. GRIM's next voyage is planned for the following year, 1981. This time, they bring a more finely tuned sonar system called Deep Tow that shows smaller objects. The team travels 900 miles into the North Atlantic and begins to survey the search area and the 14 targets identified the previous year that lie in it.
We concentrated with the Deep Tow instrument of the Scripps Institution, and so we picked all those targets in between and checked them off one by one by one.
They examined 13 of the 14 targets. Then disaster. The winch that launches and retrieves Deep Tow breaks before they can finish their survey. Under that final target, Titanic.
Did we find the Titanic? That's a question lots of people ask us. I think you could say we beautifully imaged the gravesite of the Titanic. We beautifully imaged the landscape. But until you have some identifier, these are just acoustic targets.
With just hours left on the mission, the winch is repaired. GRIM asks Ryan to deploy another piece of equipment that he had financed, the Deep Sea Color video system. This vehicle was meant to shoot video of Titanic if they found it. It can't send images to the ship, but does record them for later viewing. On the 4-day journey back to shore, the search party looks at this videotape.
And then the instrument pulls up off the bottom, and in view comes these big curved object. My reaction is, oh, we've hit a huge glacial boulder. And GRIM shouts out, the propeller!
It would take 2 more years until a third GRIM expedition could be planned. The 1983 mission fails to confirm the alleged propeller again.
I think we were all a little intimidated by, if they went out there and weren't able to find it, maybe it wasn't findable.
But as GRIM's team sails back to port for the last time, another expedition was already in the planning. On September 1st, 1985, Robert Ballard and the Woods Hole team are on the verge of the greatest discovery in maritime history. This is the Titanic debris field as it exists in the 21st century. Scattered on this muddy foundation lie items that mark over 2,200 lives. Did the unsinkable Molly Brown order this Clicquot champagne at a stiff $3.50 a bottle? Did William Stead eat soup from one of those bowls as he discussed his scheduled speech at Carnegie Hall? Did Father Biles use this bench to stand on as he gave scores of people absolution in their final moments? So many passengers and the daily items they used. But as recently as 1985, these objects were hidden by the Atlantic's cold darkness, waiting for someone to find them. After the flamboyant Texas oil man Jack Grimm fails to find the Titanic in 3 separate expeditions during the early 1980s, the media dubs the entire affair Grimm's fairy tale.
Jack Grimm left a major contribution to science, a major legacy, this fabulous equipment that we used on many, many expeditions to essentially illuminate the ocean floor for the first time.
But while Grimm is pursuing this so-called fairy tale, the scientists, engineers, and technicians at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution are working on a concept they're convinced will open the mystifying ocean floor to the world. They call it telepresence, bringing video cameras to the depths of the ocean. By 1982, the Office of Naval Research contributes $2.8 million for the development of the